Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Secrets of a Witch podcast with me, Sabrina Scott, where I talk all about life, love, healing, witchcraft, magic, spirituality, tarot, mediumship, and everything in between. But lately I've been talking about a lot of health stuff. Like mental health stuff, confidence stuff, interpersonal relationships stuff, because even though we might be witches, we might be spiritual, we might be this, we might be that, at the end of the day, like wherever we go, there we are. And oh my god, there's 3 cute birds on a power line I can see at the moment, and they are chirping away, looking awesome. So I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's super cool to see. I love summer for this reason. There's always creatures and birds around. It's just lovely, even living in the middle of the city. But anyway, I'm sure some folks are like, oh my god, this podcast is called Secrets of a Witch. Why does this person keep talking about relationships and standards and confidence and boundaries? Okay, so the answer is this, and I've talked about it on previous episodes, but I'll just reiterate it today just for fun. So I've done so many consultations with people over the years around magic and witchcraft and how to approach magic for improving their lives. And one of the patterns I've noticed is that a lot of people are doing magic to solve problems that aren't really the best solved with magic, right? It's like a mindset problem, or it's just an interpersonal relationships problem. It's a confidence problem. And obviously we can work magic to finesse all of that stuff. At the same time, I do think that the more healed we are, the more emotionally sober and confident we are, that is going to ripple out into our magic, and it is going to affect the type of spiritual work that we do. And so I think it's just an important thing. So anyway, today's topic is flakiness. So I know that flakiness is such a pet peeve for some people, and I've always found this to be honestly somewhat shocking. Because, I don't know, I just don't see it that big of a deal. So if I think back to my past friendships, over the course of my, teens and 20s, and, what I can kind of come up with is that my worst friendships were the ones where people were the least understanding and gave me the least grace if I had to cancel. And that is just something that I've kind of taken with me, and I'm not friends with any of those people anymore. Any of those people who, I don't know, were mean if I was gonna bail on something. I remember I used to be with this friend group of witchy chicks, and I'm not friends with any of them anymore. But I remember one of them invited us all to this cottage, and I had strep throat. I could barely talk. I was like a frog. And I felt like total shit. And I was so I had kind of 2 plans. So it was I was first of all dying of strep throat. And I was invited to a going away party for a friend from my master's who was moving out of province. And then I was invited to this cottage thing where people are all just going to be living still in Toronto. And so what was so interesting was the person with the going away party, when I said I couldn't make it, was so nice and so chill about it, no big deal. And the person who was living in the city who invited to the cottage thing was so mean and guilt tripped me so hard, my little 22-year-old self, that I ended up giving in and going on this cottage weekend trip, even though I was fucked up from strep throat. I was on so much antibiotics and probiotics. It was ridiculous. I couldn't really enjoy myself. And I was like, you guys, if I go on this trip, I'm like honestly not really going to be able to help you guys with like much activities and cleaning and whatever. And guess what ended up happening? I did have to help like get on my hands and knees and like dust and clean the place, even though I was like, y'all, I've got a fever, like I've got strep throat, like I feel like shit. And it was all because this one friend was like guilt tripping me so hard and being so like, oh my gosh, you don't care about our friendship, you're such a flake, blah 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 blah. And I was in my early 20s, and I was so easily manipulated by that, and I didn't really have as much of a backbone, and I really wanted to stay friends, and I knew that, you know, if I just did what this person said, then we would stay friends, and it was fine. And obviously now looking back at it, I'm like, wow, fuck that person. That was like really like, you know, not very nice, and definitely not very compassionate of them to be that way. And so it's a series of lessons I've learned over time, right? And so now if anyone ever needs to flake out on me for any reason, my answer is always like, okay, no problem. And I genuinely mean that. Like, I don't want anyone to override their own boundaries, whether that's boundaries due to like emotional bandwidth, or you know, maybe they're just exhausted. Maybe they overbooked themselves. They overcommitted, you know, whatever. Like, I just need to give people grace. Like, that's kind of what I've come to in my own life with this. It's like, I don't want anyone to be spending time with me if they need to override their own boundaries and their own energy levels in order to do so. Right? And like, obviously there's some exceptions to this kind of. It's like if you have an emergency and like everything is popping off and everything is crazy and you're in a crisis and you really need people to show up for you, like obviously that's a little bit of a different situation. Like, I think we can all hope that people we care about will show up for us in our times of need, even if it's a little bit inconvenient and even if they're tired. Like, I think to some extent that is what like relationships can be about, is showing up for each other like in those times of need. At the same time, it's like, if it's just a normal thing, it's like, you know, it's just a Tuesday and we're going out for drinks or whatever. It's just like, a cottage weekend. Like, that can happen any other time. And someone needs to flake because they're sick or they're tired or they're just like, they need some alone time and they haven't been able to do that for the past few weeks. I'm like, honor yourself. Do your thing. Like, do it. Honor whatever it is that your body wants to be doing. That's kind of how I feel about it. And I just, it's fine. And I hope that other people give me grace whenever I need to cancel on something. And I kind of expect to be given grace now. And if people don't, then like, they're not going to be lasting in my sphere for very long. I can tell you that. And that honestly has ended up working really great for me. Like, if anyone ever like needs to bail on just like a normal thing like that, for me, it doesn't bother me, because I'm glad that they feel comfortable enough with me and that they trust me enough to be honest with themselves and with me about what their body, their mental, their physical needs are in that moment. To me, that is like what solid, healthy relating to one another is all about. Being able to be honest with each other about how we're feeling, rather than like pushing underneath the rug because, oh my God, if I say I need like to rain check because I'm fucking exhausted from work, this person's going to be pissed and there's going to be a fight. So I'm going to do like harm reduction and I'm just going to override my own needs for silence and quiet and solitude. And I'm just going to go hang out with this person even though I'm like fucking spent. Like, that is not a way to live, in my opinion. And like, obviously we all get exhausted sometimes, and like every situation is a little bit different, and maybe sometimes we can feel really good when we override our exhaustion. Like, I know sometimes when I do yoga in my living room, like when I'm exhausted and I'm not in the mood, sometimes I do feel better afterwards, and I'm glad I did it. So sometimes obviously it's going to be like that, but at the same time, I think if we're adults, like, we need to honor the other people's capacities. We need to honor where they're at. You know what I mean? And so I just honestly don't understand why people take flakiness very seriously. And I even don't like that word of flakiness. And I think, again, it's different if someone's unreliable, like when you really need them, like in a crisis, like whenever that happens to be. Obviously, that's different. But I think it's really important to just honor people where they're at. Like, sometimes people overcommit because they're really excited and they want to have energy for everything, but at the end of the day, they might not. And like, I know for me, as someone who has lived with like disability related exhaustion and like all these different things over the past many years, is like, yeah, sometimes I have overcommitted socially, and sometimes I do need to cancel plans because I have a migraine or I'm just tired or whatever is going on. And so I just think the world is a better place when we all give ourselves and each other grace. And when we don't take it personally when someone changes a plan or cancels or needs to reschedule. Because probably that doesn't really have anything to do with us. That person might be going through something, the person might be sick, the person might be exhausted, they might be going through some stress or some kind of physical illness or mental thing that you don't know anything about, and that could be because maybe you're not close enough yet for that person to tell you that. Maybe you always flip out, and so you're not like a trusted person that person feels like they can talk to honestly. That's something to fucking be aware of, as I've seen that a lot as well. And so if you are someone who takes flakiness very personally, like, just take a step back, like, disengage, stop taking it so seriously. Like, can you be more detached? Can you stop taking it so personally as like a personal affront and a personal insult that is specifically about you? Like, why not focus on the people who do show up? Why not focus on the people who do say yes to plans? Maybe it was supposed to be a group of 20, maybe end up being a group of 10, like, whatever. Focus on the people who showed up. And personally, I would still invite those other people who flaked next time and just hope for the best. And if they never show up, then they never show up, and that's fine. And I don't take it personally, and it just is what it is. That's kind of how I see it. I think life and relationships and relating always goes better when we don't take all this stuff personally, and when we give other people grace. Like, we never know what other people are going through. And honestly, like, if you don't know each other that well, then like, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. It's kind of what I want to say about it. And if someone ever cancels or bails like on me, honestly, I'm always like, yeah, no problem. Thank you for telling me. Like, I hope you're doing okay. If you need anything, let me know. That is always my approach to it, honestly. And it's not forced. It's not fake. That is genuinely 100% how I personally feel. Because I really value being in relationship with people who honor their bodies and who honor their own boundaries. Right? And so if you are like triggered by this, one thing you can ask yourself is, do I override my own boundaries? Do I go out with people when I'm not in the mood, or when I'm exhausted, or when I feel sick, or when I need some me time? Do I override my own boundaries for other people? Because I think sometimes when people override their own boundaries on behalf of others when other people did not ask them to, they kind of expect everyone else in their lives to do that same boundary override. It's like, if you really cared about me, you'd override your own boundaries. And I hate that shit. Like, can we just not? Can we just all respect our own boundaries, and can we just all respect each other's boundaries? That's what I think would make the world a better place. And so, again, if you're triggered by this and you are someone who goes out when you don't feel like it, or says yes when you want to say no, I would challenge you to test it out. Test out what I'm talking about. Test out saying no when you want to say no, and see the ripple effects that happen. And if some people are mad at you for that, then guess what? You've got some important information and some data that can teach you about the relationships you have with the people in your life, which is interesting and fun, right? One of the things that I hope everyone gets from all of these different kind of like random life topic podcast episodes is everything is a lot more interesting than we think it is. And reacting to something like flakiness. Like, there's so much more that we can learn about ourselves and other people when we do a deep dive into our reactions and turn that, I don't know, like reaction, instead of like lashing out against someone else, turning our reaction back towards ourselves and not lashing out, but meeting ourselves and others with curiosity and openness. Because when we are more at peace with ourselves, when we're more grounded, we take away less personally, right? Like, we take all these things like way less personally, whatever it happens to be. We don't see it as a personal affront or an insult, and life becomes a lot more peaceful. I'm just gonna say. So that's the episode for today, my friends. I'm still working on my Goddess Rising Feminine Energy Without Bullshit proper launch. So stay tuned. A few days later than I was hoping, but that is how life goes. And that's that. So I hope to see you in that course if any of this feminine energy stuff is interesting to you. And if anyone is more interested in a one-on-one experience coaching through feminine energy, feel free to reach out. Like, I'm more than happy to help with that as well. CEO@sabrinamscott.com. Of course, say hello on, excuse me, on Instagram at Sabrina M. Scott. My website is sabrinamscott.com. And you can check out this past week's tarot vibe check. Still counts for today, tomorrow, and Sunday on YouTube. So go over to youtube.com/Sabrina Scott. I will be doing another tarot vibe check, I believe, tomorrow on Saturday, because a lot of people just seem to like having the vibe for the week a few days earlier. So I will be doing that, and I might be doing a little Friday night live on YouTube as well. So if you're home tonight with nothing much to do, feel free to keep your eyeballs peeled onto the good old big bad internet and have a lovely night inside with me. All right, friends, that's it. Catch you on the flip side. Have a lovely, lovely weekend. Bye.